Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Today's Thursday. It's AM for a change while I'm out here. And I'm going to continue watering the normal pots and trying to find anything new or changes worth note. All that sort of stuff, buds, spikes, things, stuff that looked like it was dying and now isn't, or stuff that looked like it was good and now is dying, all that sort of stuff. So it's like a continuation of the one I posted yesterday morning. But although it's Thursday today, this won't actually get posted till Friday morning. So if you're watching it now, hi, and it's Friday morning, but filmed yesterday. What is today? I'm getting in a muddle now. I'm sure you are too. Anyway, that's the idea of this one. It's another what's new type thing, you know, as I go round, and we'll have a look. The first one to look at is this Wilbur Chan, whichever. One of the two, you'll get a pop-up. You won't get a picture of a bloom, because so far it hasn't done that. But this doesn't look like a growth to me. That looks like the possibility of a spike. And if it is, then probably so is that. Probably so is that. And sorry about filming on here, but this is wet. I don't want to get my wooden shelf wet. It won't do it any good at all. But probably so is that. And probably so is that. So in theory, we got 5 spikes coming on this. So obviously giving it a really good talking to last time I filmed it has done some good. Believe that if you will. But I got no guarantee because I haven't seen this bloom before. I've got no idea what these spikes are supposed to look like. But whatever there is, there's 5 of them. If that's 5 blooms, I'll be over the world, over the moon. There is a theory, certainly true of one of the parents, that once you get a spike, it can produce, they produce single blooms, but they're a bit like a psychopsis in as much as that bloom fades and another one forms above it. So in theory, it could be in bloom for a while if those are spikes. So that's that one. I'm not quite sure if there is a good time to repot this thing. I know that last time it was repotted, which is quite a while ago, which is why it now needs doing again, it objected and dumped most of its roots, which it may well do again. But what I've got at the moment is a relatively new growth here that has produced some new roots. I've got another one coming here, and I've got another one that's maturing round the back, which means there's 3 different places with, oh, and this one here is actually quite a relatively new growth too, which probably has new roots underneath it. But at some point it's got to be done, and it strikes me that, you know, this sort of time of year, it's got the growing season coming up to sort of recover. But with root loss and or lack of hydration, because one can give you the other, this is what happens to the leaves on this one. It's the equivalent of the Oncidium type concertina leaves, but on this they just twist and get distorted. Now most of the recent leaves are not too bad on this one. I certainly haven't had one go like that for some time anyway. But when it's actively growing, it's a hell of a drinker. The problem being, this pot stays wet too long. So maybe some of the old roots are failing, but there are white roots showing in the pot. Okay, so I'm not sure whether this is the best time or not, but just prior to watering it, this one's going out in the kitchen now, and it's going out with this one, which I've also not watered for the same reason. Now this is Coleogene. Actually, no, it's not. Well, you can stay where you are. Somewhere there's another Coleogene needs repotting. Where did I put it? Oh, come on, you can't lose a plant. The place isn't that big. Where's it gone? There it is. Hang on, I'll switch the camera off for a minute because I've got to dig. Yeah, this is the, that was Coleogene moriana. Well, it's actually got a big long name, but that's all you need. This one is a tiny little version of what it can one day be. And this is Orchracea, or Orchracea, however you want to say it, but it's not called that anymore. It's called Coleogyne nitida, which is much easier to say, or nitida. I love playing with these names. But this is doing something. It's growing 2 new somethings. Now this has bloomed. So those could be spikes. They could be new growths. But that pot will not dry. The plant has been in there too long. So I'm classing that as an emergency repot. So that's 2 coleogenes to do. And my other one, the cristata, I forgot to say when I filmed that yesterday. It's not strictly speaking just cristata, it's the variety Lemoniana, which according to one of the comments against that video, blooms later. I mean, it is a named variety and it's a recognised variety, and it's got nothing to do with the colour apparently. It was the guy who named it was a Mr. Lemon, so it's Lemoniana. But anyway, I did forget to say that, so that's the thing. That needs repotting, but it also looks like it's about to flower, so that one's going to be left for a bit. But I think these 2 can go out in the kitchen and be dealt with. They've both been in their pots too long. And it's the start of the growing season, and if this one's going to bloom, the worst that can happen is the spikes are bought, but I don't think they will because they haven't formed buds yet. They'll probably be fine, so we'll get those 2 in the kitchen. Now these are the 2 potted up Dendrobium hercoglossum kikis. Both plants are to go, and because they are one and the same in the drawer, but are actually quite different, I tossed a coin to see who got which one. And there's a reason, because they are different. The one at the back here is growing 2 kikis, yeah? It does also have, let me get the other one out of the way because they get muddled up, it also has what looks like some flower spikes just starting. So that one's got kikis, some flower spikes, yeah, that's that one. The other one has a flower spike, probably, could be a kiki, possibly flower spike. But what it has got is buds that should open soon and another spike to follow on, yeah? Also this one has a new growth just starting on one of the kikis. So they are both different even though they're the same plant. So I literally tossed a coin to see which one of the 2 draw winners got which one. I thought that was the only fair way to do. But who gets what, you're going to have to wait and see till you get your package. But anyway, these should grow on pretty good this year, I'd have thought, and produce. I would hope to see a new growth from the base of each one of the kikis in those pots. So in theory, the plants will double in size. The buds on this little ugly beast are pushing on quite nicely now. This is my Dendrobium Stardust Firebird. The original plant I had of this went. I can't remember whether I actually gave it away or threw it away, but I got rid of it because I got fed up with it growing kikis and looking a mess. This is the one that came in the big box, which fell straight out of its pot when it came out of the big box, and since then it's grown a couple of new growths. I think this is what I got, these 2 old canes, and attempted to do another cane and failed miserably, tiny little one, although that might have already been there. No sign of new growths at the base yet, which is what I want, but we are going to get some blooms. And although that's an ugly plant, boy is that going to make it look infinitely better, because the blooms are very nice. So Dendrobium Stardust Firebird, the renowned kiki machine. Well, I'm going to keep it cooler, and it's certainly been quite dry through the winter. And so far, it hasn't produced a kiki. So you better behave yourself or you'll be out. I'm not sure I've ever filmed this since I first got it. This came out of Big Box Junior. I may have filmed it when I potted it up. Actually, I haven't even potted this one yet. This goes with the other one that I showed in the last video from Big Box Junior, which, although not been repotted, is in very good media, lovely rock hard bark. This one has quite a nice root system. It's got some actively growing ones, but like with all, we like to wait for one of these and possibly signs of some new roots before we disturb it. Although with a root system like that in good bark, changing it wouldn't do it a lot of harm. But the first thing I need to do with this, bearing in mind this looks like this has been grown on from a seedling. It's got some very tiny old little pseudo bulbs here, and you can see the progression from tiny, bit bigger again, and then the two latest ones. So in theory this one may even have two leads, one here and one down here. But what we do have is a new growth. This is a Laelia. It's Tenebrosa aurea. And I'm pretty certain that one will get mounted. All I need to find out, I'll just have a look at some pictures, is are these bulbs up to around their full size? Yeah? Now if they are, that will look smashing on a mount. If this is still a plant in its infancy and these bulbs are going to get 2 or 3 times as big as that, then it's not going to do so well on a mount because it'll get very heavy. But at the moment that's earmarked for a mount, but not yet. I mean, I could mount it now, it's got actively growing roots, but like I've said a couple of times recently, when you mount something, the existing roots very, very rarely attach. What on earth is that? Oh, it's a bit of eggshell. Somebody been adding some calcium perhaps. But yes, existing roots very rarely attach. You need new ones. Now I mean something like that would, even though it's an existing root that's now decided to branch, that would probably attach. But this won't, and this won't. But they would hydrate the plant. But anyway, that's earmarked to go on a mount. I don't think the roots are that bad in here. It's got some failed roots in there. See, this might have been recently potted, but it has got some active growing tips in there and some showing above ground. Lovely one down, lovely new growth down the bottom there at the very base of the pot. So I'll probably mount that one. So that'll be that's not urgent. As I say, I'll wait for the roots to show, and then we'll get on with that one. Should be good. Another Laelia. I haven't got many of those. Now this one doesn't get filmed very often because it hasn't done much for a while, but that is its natural state. It's another one of those drier in winter, and the reason it's drier in winter because it doesn't do much. If it's not doing much, it doesn't need the water and the feed. But what it is doing is coming into bloom. We've got a nice little spike on that. Immature cane, I'd call that. I got a feeling that was one of last year's growths that didn't grow very well. Probably got caught in a heat wave. And we've got 2 on that growth as well. We've got 2 spikes coming there. So that's 3. Any more lurking? They tend to hide under the leaves on this plant. Well, 3 definitely. And this is this is good. This has got a proper name, registered cross. It's a primary cross, but it's Memoria Christa Erdmann. And it's a cross between Griffithianum and Farmeri. Hold that thought. Now why I said hold that thought is because I've got another one. Yeah? This one is probably unregistered, but it could have been. Whereas the other one was Griffithianum crossed with Farmeri, this is Farmeri crossed with Griffithianum. And you might think, well, what's the difference? Well, luckily, or hopefully, I'll be able to show you, because that one that we've just looked at had some spikes. Now I've just had a good look round this one and I can only find one, but it's in a similar stage of development as the ones on the other plant. So in theory they could be in bloom at the same time, which is good because one I've got a picture of and the other one I haven't. So it would be nice if they both come out together, then I can show you the difference of the cross being the other way round. They're not the same. This looks so ugly and so bad. It's an old problem that the plant came with, quite honestly. It developed a bit in my ownership and then it stopped, and you know, new leaves have come on quite nicely since then. Yeah, so whatever it is, I took it into the Orchid Society to ask, and most agreed, although no certainty, that it was the result of biting bugs in the past that then got a secondary infection. And that could be true. I mean, a lot of people would panic looking at those leaves because some of these markings do look like a ring. and there is such a thing as a ring spot virus. Incredibly rare on a dendrobium, quite honestly. So I think it probably is what the guys said, and it's some sort of secondary infection. So we won't worry too much about it. I mean, it does get the spray with the fungicide every now and again, and as I said, I haven't seen it getting any worse, and the new leaves don't seem too bad. Suffered a bit in the heat wave and did actually drop a few leaves, but it's a pity it didn't drop these. Anyway, two that seem the same that are not. So they're very unusual. Let's find one to show you. This one, although it's got the bad leaves on it. Very unusual cross section to the pseudobulbs. They're square. They've got straight sides. Yeah? So it's quite unusual to have straight sides like that. They're normally roundish or oval. These have got distinct flat sides to them, and there's four, so they form a square. It's quite unusual. Anyway, that's that one. Blooms to come, even though it's only a single spike. This does tend to bloom any time it likes. I've had this one a while, so the chances are last year's new growths should bloom later in the year, but one of the older canes has a spike anyway. This is another one never gets filmed because it never does anything. It has grown, you know, it's well, and the thing it has done really well is absolutely crammed its pot full of roots. It has produced some new growths. It has not bloomed. Now this is actually a Miltonia species, Miltonia flavescens, and it's going out in the kitchen, and it's probably going to go on a mount. There's a few little bulbs around one side can come off, which should give me a nice flat edge like that to mount it. Most of the new growths will be away from the mount then, although it does throw some up the middle. But yeah, it's not going to grow. I mean, that's the biggest pseudobulb on it, so it's not going to grow absolutely huge, but it did put out a lot of new growth. I was expecting at least one of them to bloom, but it hasn't yet. It may be having trouble getting hydrated because it's filled the pot. And the trouble is when that happens, it sounds brilliant because it sounds, oh, look at all those roots, that'll hydrate. And there's no media to keep it moist. They sort of eat it. Don't know where it all goes, but once that was a pot full of media, now it's a pot full of roots with algae all around the outside. So I think I'm going to put that out to do now. And that'll be part of the kitchen session. Yeah, I quite look forward to some blooms on that, I must admit. Another non-bloomer. I've had it a while, probably had it a good 2 years, but no blooms so far. Now, this is my Encyclia cordigera, but it's actually a named variety. It is Siang Yu, and I messed this plant up. Long story. But basically, I potted it on. So I put nice new media around the outside of broken down media like an idiot. That's quite a while ago now. But again, this plant doesn't dry out very well, and some of the algae is dying. So something in that pot is not right. So that's going out in the kitchen as well. I'm making a hell of a workload for myself today. But if I'm going to have a kitchen session and make a mess, you know, and I've been itching to get this fern out of the pot and pot it up separately. It's a lovely little fern. And it's not going to grow well like that because obviously I let the plant totally dry out in between watering. So poor old fern's suffering a bit. So we get him in a separate pot and get him growing on separately. That'll be 1, 2, 3, 4. That'll be 5 ferns I've got on the floor there. I'll have to start another greenhouse, won't I? Or chuck them out in the garden. Well, I say chuck them out in the garden. Not all ferns that you can buy in the UK are actually hardy. You need to watch what you're doing. Anyway, so I think that one can go in the kitchen. This grew some new growths. There's no sign of any buds coming. This is a new growth down here. This is a new growth. There's no sign of a bud in there. There's another one in the middle of the plant there with no sign of a bud. So I think I might have to wait for the next round of new growths. But if it's not happy in its pot, you know, it's not going to have the energy to produce the blooms. So I think we'll get that one done as well. It's been on the list, you know, so I mean, it's not like I'm just inventing something to repot. all my ones to repot are in red in the spreadsheet, so that every time I look at it to do any form of update, the red shouts at me and says, will you get on with your repotting before it's summertime? So I think we'll get that one out and give it some fresh media and get that dying algae. You know, for algae to start dying in a pot, you've got a problem in there, and I suspect there's some mould in there or something, but it's not happy as it is, so do something about it, Roger. We will. Okay. No, I don't talk to myself, honest. I've got a camera in my hand. That's my excuse. I'm sticking to it. How long do you put up with a plant? I've always said never give up on a dendrobium, but my tolerance is pushed sometimes. I bought the mother plant of this in May 2015. It bloomed towards the end of that year and hasn't since. That's pushing my patience. And this plant just never grew right. It only grew kikis. Eventually it went to somebody else, and I took 2 kikis off before it went out the door and planted them. And quite honestly, despite those buds, this is growing new roots now. So that's going out to be repotted or possibly mounted. It is a nobile type, allegedly, but I'm not quite so sure. The fact, well, looking at where it's pushed those buds out, on a nobile, the buds should come out on the opposite side of a leaf node, and those buds have come out right in the middle. So I'm now not so sure. Anyway, it's going to bloom, so I never got a picture of this, so but I've kept it on the grounds I thought the blooms were good. But in 2015, the blooms that I thought were good then might not actually appeal to me anymore. But I'm going to take that one out and get that in the repotting thing. Whoops, as if we don't throw it on the floor. And that is Lovely Virgin Angel. And I put Nobile Hybrid on the tag when I did the tag. You can see how old that is. That's my old tags. I haven't used them for donkeys. But it's growing new roots now. Now's a good time to get that in some fresh media, or possibly mount it. I might mount that one. It doesn't look like it's ever going to turn into a giant. I don't think I haven't got any mounted Nobiles. Might be nice to try one and see how they get on. So, but blooms to come, and quite soon. Difficult to say what colour it's going to be, but there's tinges of pinks, purples, possibly. Difficult to tell. We'll have to wait and see, but coming soon. And repotting it should not affect those buds, quite honestly. They're on the older cane. That's not where the new roots are, so this cane with the buds on is being supported by the other one. That's the one with the roots. It's highly likely it will continue to bloom without any interruption because it's got new roots growing. So we'll give that one a go. That list in the kitchen's getting big, isn't it? We'll be out there all afternoon. God, that's going to blinking get through some wine, isn't it? I don't know how many of you will remember this, but when I got the lights, I visited a friend for another reason, and basically said, well, if you're going to do an experiment with some under lights and some not under lights, you need some, test subjects. And he gave me these 6 seedlings, 3 to go under the grow light, the Gemma grow light, and 3 not. And that's what I did. Unfortunately, since then, they all got put on the same shelf, and I haven't got a clue which one's which. But this is a difficult one because of his flipping handwriting. He should have been a doctor. It's Dendrobium moniliform variegata, which is where mine came from. I can't see it at the moment. It's up on the rack at the moment. That's the one that was in bloom a while back. So that was one of his seedlings. But it's now been crossed with that. Now, it's Raita, but with his writing, that could be an N or a U. But whatever it is, I've never heard of it. Raitan or Raitau. Yeah, so I don't know what it's been crossed with. And there's several tags, and they all look the same. They're all difficult to say. See, now that last letter on that tag looks like a U. But the one on that looks like an N. So I haven't got a clue what it's been crossed with. But what I've just noticed, taking it down to water, This one's got a new growth coming on it, and so has that one. So 2 are coming into growth, but only the 2 that I can see at the moment. One of them tried to put a new growth up in the winter. That was this one over here. Put up that tiny little growth there. But it looks like they're coming back into growth. I mean, quite honestly, a quick glance of these plants, that's the strongest one. That's the one that obviously grew well at one point, but it's only got 1 cane with leaves on. Now, you know, this one's only got 1 cane with leaves on. That's got 1 and a bit. That one's only got 1. That's got 1 and a bit and a new growth. So they're all sort of a little different. But the only way I could work this out would be to go back and find the video where I actually set these up and try and identify which pot is which. Otherwise, I just don't know. Logically, the ones that had the extra light through the winter would be the first ones to come into growth. But I don't know that. Anyway, I'm not going to want all 6 of them, that's for sure. But I can't just get rid of them. I would have to ask Alan if he actually wants them back. I always assumed they were a gift, but they might have been a loan. I don't know, I'll have to ask him. But he does have his own laboratory. He does grow a lot from seed and produces his own crosses, and he uses them to sell to fund his hobby. So he might want them back. Anyway, that's 6 tiny little plants, tiny little dendrobium seedlings. And this time I know they're seedlings. But the one thing I have noticed, although one of the parents is the Moniliform variegata, the variation is not showing on these leaves. So it looks like the cross has taken that nice little tinge of white around the edges away. Although it could show on more mature canes, it could come back again. Now that's those. Now I've got a decision to make with this little one. This came out of the big box from Beatrix. Didn't look very good when I got it, but I thought, you know, we'll get it. It was struggling with roots, so I put some moss around it. It's a Zygonicea, Murasaki Kamado dark blue, or blue in French, bleu. But it's growing something in the centre of the plant. Now I don't know what that is. You know, it has grown a little new growth and a secondary one. I can't remember which one came first, but it's now growing something else. I would say by the size of the plant that is highly unlikely to not be a spike and be another new growth. So now might be a good time. This needs repotting, mainly because the top of the plant is in pure moss. There's no media there at all, so it's you know, it will have packed down over time and have virtually no air around it. It's got some bark in the bottom. It did grow some roots at one point. I could see active roots, so there are some roots in under it, but I think it might be time to get that out of the pot. Well, it's got a growing season coming up. I suppose now is as good a time as any. That is probably a new growth coming there, but we shall see. Right, that's the end of that watering session and what's new as I was going around. The other thing that is new is my clivias dropping blooms left, right and centre. So I think that's nearly finished. That's a shame. I had a good look in the pot, the Cymbidium pot, and the slimy trails are there and they weren't there before. So I think that was the the death roll of the aforementioned slug, because I haven't seen any further damage on the blooms. So yeah, I think the slug pellets did their job anyway. So yeah, virtually finished watering out here now. Just letting these things drip and drain before they go back on my wooden shelf, because I need to keep that dry. And as you saw, quite a lot of pots got lifted up to go to the kitchen. So that's the next job. Boy, is that going to be a big session. I probably won't film all of it, but I will film some. Lots of people like the kitchen stuff, so we'll see what we can do. Anyway, that's it for that session. See you next time.